Good afternoon. How are you? Good? Good. Awake? Great. Oh, what's happening there? We've got the slides. Okay. So, as Chris said, my name is Adah Paris. I thought I would start with a little bit of a story as to how I've ended up here. So through the biography, I wear many hats. You know, no pun intended. I wear many hats, but I'm technology futurist. I take a kind of philosophical approach to technology. What's the impact it's going to have on humans? But a lot of my life has been spent building communities. How many people have heard of Burning Man? Yeah? Okay, so I built a camp at Burning Man for Carl Cox, the DJ. I have helped to build the School of Communication Arts, which some of the other speakers have been involved in. I have spent a lot of time building communities, but one of the things about me is that I look for patterns across different worlds. I look for patterns across different worlds, and then I look at how we can bring those together. So as Daniele was talking about, I'm a hacker. He calls me a life hacker. I look at different things, pull them apart, and then look at how I can start to bring them together. As Dave just said, I experiment. I really try and create these different experiments. My whole life is an experiment. The way that I work is really through the process of experimenting and trying to understand what are the different ways that you can build communities. Because I think that for me, that's really central to everything that I've done. A lot of the speakers today have covered a lot of what I was going to cover, so that's me done. But it's great because, again, for me, what I love about this, my first time here, and what I love about this event, is that there's been even though everybody has a very different background and very different experiences, there's a synergy that runs through all of them. And I love that. It's one of the, I have to say, congratulations to everybody involved, because it's one of the most exciting ones I've been to, because it's so different, because you have people with different backgrounds. But a key theme, and I'm just really glad that actually I already have it on the slides. Does it come up? No? Wait. There we go. A key theme is that all of us in some way are trying to bridge a gap. We run businesses, we are trying to bridge a gap between the external story and the internal behavior. Whether it's for ourselves, we're trying to understand this is the external projection of who I am, or who I say I am, and this is the internal who I am. What I do with businesses or with clients is I help them work out what's that gap, what's in that gap, and how can we bridge that gap. And so what we're also trying to do is we are all problem solvers. A bit like Daniele was saying, you know, he didn't see himself as a creative. We have these ideas of what these labels are, but ultimately every single human is a problem solver. And really, for me, that's kind of what innovation is. What we're also trying to do, as I have now got to a stage where I know that what I do, the way that I do it, is I look for patterns. I look for the patterns in different worlds, translate them, and try and bring them together in new stories. And I think that that's a lot of what has been happening out there. Has anybody heard of the, does anybody know the word Ouroboros? Yeah? Ouroboros is the oldest symbol in the world. It's normally depicted as a snake eating its tail. It means that everything is connected. And when I'm looking at how we start to build cultures and communities, we're looking at how we solve problems, we're looking for the patterns, and then we try and bring those things together. We're trying to look at what is it that brings those things together. And so for me, everything that I do is really trying to do this. I'm trying to do what I love. You as business owners, you that work in businesses, what you're trying to do is we're trying to create communities, cultures, where people feel that they're doing what they love. And in order to do that, I think it's important to first of all try and understand, what do we mean by culture? Now, Daniele was here talking about, he is part of Utopia. I'm part of his Utopia group. He runs Innovation Social. He also runs something called Culture Social. And when you ask people what does culture mean, people will come up with very different ideas. It's a bit like, if I was to ask you all, what is innovation? I'm sure lots of you would have very different ideas. So for me, I'm going to take it right down to basics for my understanding of that. Culture is the basis of collective storytelling. It's a culmination of lots of different stories and the way that we can then express them in very different ways. So the way that I look at that is what we're trying to do when we're building cultures is we're trying to build a library. We're trying to build a library of all of these different stories. And in that library, we can have Dostoevsky and we can have Harry Potter. But each one of them has value. No one is better or worse than the other. They're just very different. And so for you as business owners, what I try to talk about, what I try to talk about is that when you're building a culture, you are trying to build a culture where everybody's story is included, where people feel that they are part of that. Because your customers, your first customers are your employees. Think about that. Your first customers are your employees. They're the people who, without them, you would not have a business. You would not have an opportunity. And so as business owners, as people who work and try and create communities and cultures, what you're trying to do is make sure that people feel that they are included, that their stories have power, that their stories are part of that library, because they're also looking to have impact. They're also looking, that's the wrong side there, they're also trying to have impact. So in April this year, I was fortunate enough to go to TED in Vancouver. And one of the best talks that I heard was this guy. And I'm really bad with names, so I have to just check his name. His name is Hamadi Ulukara. Excuse the pronunciation. But what I loved about his talk is that he says that we need to change, in order to change the businesses, in order to change businesses and culture for the way that we need to, we need to change the playbook. As CEOs and business owners, what we've been doing is been using the same playbook. It's been about impact, it's been about market share, it's been about profits. Now we're businesses, we're all trying to make a profit, we're all trying to run a business. But really, we need to change the playbook. And the playbook has to be more about humans. It has to be more about human impact. We have to look at how can we how can we create a playbook for our businesses that is about human impact and the stories. And I'm not just talking about your end customers. It's also about the people who work within your organizations. And so what I'm going to do is, with my futurist hat on, I am going to talk about some of the patterns that I have noticed and recognized, and some of the reports that I've seen over the last couple of years, especially the last year, some of the patterns that I have seen that tells me what's going on and starts to look at how can you start to change and create these types of cultures. So the first pattern I've seen is about identity. People, you've probably seen it, there's lots of stories around people wanting to bring their full selves to work. Part of the other things that I do is around working with people, especially within organizations, around this idea of personal brand identity. A lot of people say, I want to be a brand, I want to tell my story, I want to understand when I come to work, because I'm spending 8 hours there, as people spend a lot more time at work than they do elsewhere, with people that they haven't necessarily chosen to be friends, but they still want to bring their sense of self to that. People also want to be in a space where they can tell their stories and reflect who they are. It's just like the reason why we choose particular friends, particular music, is because we want to be recognized as this is who I am. The choices I make reflect me. The second is, again with the futurist hat on, is about culture. Now, how many organizations in here have actually been through digital transformation? Or how many people know about digital transformation? Yes? Okay, so one of the things that I've seen in a lot of reports and I've seen through a lot of conversations is that people tend to underestimate the impact that digital transformation has on culture. Because what happens is you go through the process of we are going to go and get new technologies to help us become more efficient, to help us work smarter, to help us work faster. But when you start to introduce some of those technologies to the organization, you're fundamentally changing the way that people communicate. You're fundamentally changing the way that people interact. I remember, I think Nicole mentioned it, I remember when I was working at the IPA, so membership organization for agencies, when Facebook first came along. At first, we used to have conversations around, there was an actual water cooler. We used to have conversations. I used to smoke. We used to go outside and have a cigarette, and we would talk. And we used to have these conversations. And then people started really getting into email. We would email each other. And then Facebook came along, and people wanted to create Facebook groups and messaging. And then there was Slack and WhatsApp. And people would be sitting next to each other, messaging each other, rather than having a conversation. When people are going through digital transformation, what tends to happen, and there's especially I think there's a Gartner report about this, what tends to happen is we're going to get all this nice, bright, shiny technology to make us more efficient and effective. And it's usually the CEO, IT, finance person that looks after that. Where is the people? Where is HR? Where's talent? Those people should be involved in those conversations about what's happening when you're going through digital transformation. Because what tends to happen is all the bright, shiny stuff happens, and then it's all done. We've got the new technologies, we're on this new Slack channel, everybody's using internal messaging, and the staff are going, shit. And nobody's really looking after the impact of what's happened to them. The next one is what I call economics. And I'm not talking about money. What I'm talking about is about the sustainability, the impact that you're having. People are now looking for to work in places that really have better impact. Not just about the measures of success, but also about them. Has anybody heard of the Betterness Manifesto? No? Yeah. So how many of your businesses have a vision or a mission statement? Yeah? Okay. The Betterness Manifesto was written by, excuse me, Umar Haque. So I think it started off as a Harvard Business Review. When I work with organizations, I tend to go in and say, right, what's your vision statement? What's your mission statement? And they've got this thing. I worked at a company that printed a new vision statement and gave us all this business card. And we as staff members were supposed to walk around with this business card in case anybody asked us what was the vision. The vision is this. Yes, I believe it. A Betterness Manifesto is a different way of approaching it. Because what you do is you work together with your employees to look at how are we going to make their lives better? How are we going to make all our internal, other stakeholders' lives better? How are we going to make our customers, external customers' lives better? And how are we going to make the world better, the world that we live in better? And collectively, you work together to create a Betterness Manifesto, because that becomes a different measure of impact, because people can see themselves within that. The fourth one, I love this, is ecosystems. An ecosystem is about the community. And I start to talk, when I'm talking about ecosystems in the workplace, I tend to talk about a human blockchain. And I'm not going to bore you with the technical side of what a blockchain is, because I've been working in it for years and still don't really fully understand it. However, what I do understand is about trust and transparency. It's about how do you work together to create communities and cultures that people feel that they're recognizing their potential. They're recognizing and able to articulate their value, and they're able to ask better questions. So these are some of the patterns that I've seen that have been happening. And some of the clients that I've worked with, these are some of the things that have come up. So next question is, how do you do it? How do you start to work towards building a human blockchain? So, are you ready to transform? So, a lot of it is actually based on values. What are the values of your business? We all have our personal values. We all have our... I do a really simple exercise when I'm doing a workshop of helping people to really quickly work out what their personal values are. Because as business owners, you will have that this is our value statement for the company. Who came up with that? Where does that come from? And how does that match the employees' values, their own personal values, their stories? So what I have done is looked at what are the common themes of successful businesses, the ones who have these great cultures, that sense of community. Some of these have been mentioned already today, but the first is trust. What you're trying to do is you're trying to build a culture which is based on trust. And for me, that's about reciprocity without ego. You're trying to take the egos out of a lot of the things that are happening in an organization. The sense of competition, it's always there. But you're trying to get this, to build a community, an ecosystem, a culture, where people feel that they can give and they can share. And it's not about, I'm doing this. It's not transactional. I'm doing this because I want to get this from you. It's not about that. You're trying to build a sense where people feel that they can give back. They want to give back. The second is play. It's about curiosity through play. Curiosity and learning through play. You've heard several times mentioned today, brilliant Sir Ken Robinson's talk about the fact that we have had play and curiosity educated out of us. There's another great book, quite heavy book, but it's called Homo Ludens. And it's about the idea of play. When we now play as adults, most of the time, if we play as adults, most of the time when we're talking about play, there's always a goal. I want to get this cup. I want to win this award. So we're going to put foosball tables or ping pong tables or what have you, because we want to get this. Where's that sense of unbridled, just letting go, just fuck it and see? Play. This is why I love Burning Man, because it's an adult playground where there are no goals of trying to achieve something. How do you create a culture of curiosity? Not just curiosity about the business or the industry or the sector that you're in, but a curiosity about each other. Do you really know the names of your colleagues' children? Do you know that what else they do? I ran a session once with a group session with a company, and they had the finance director in the room. And we did this exercise. And I got them to look at their different identities, personas, and the finance director. So everybody went around and said, right, I am an athlete, I'm a this, I'm a finance director, I'm all of these different things. The finance director said, I'm also a hardcore raver. Everybody in the company was like, what? He said, oh yeah, no, I love to rave. And then he started talking about this whole thing, and suddenly was going, this is the man that gives us the pay rises and generally says no, and everything it's not on the budget sheet. And suddenly they go, shit, this man likes to rave. It changed the way that they saw him. They saw him as human. How are you doing that within your organizations? How are you encouraging people, creating a space where people feel safe enough and included enough to be able to do that? The next is activism. Empathetic and compassionate evolution. We've heard talk about empathy, we've heard talk about compassion. Activism isn't necessarily going on a march, which I will be doing tomorrow. It's not just about going on the march. Activism starts within. It starts with having an idea of something that you want to change and knowing how to measure that. There's no ego within that. But you know that there is something that you want to change. You have found your voice and you're willing to stand up for that because it matches your values. But you're also then going to find the others, because you know it can start with one, but you're going to try and find the others. That's what activism is. How do you create a culture of activism within your organization where people feel that they can stand up for the things that they believe in, that they know the changes that they want to make happen, and they can find the others, and they have the voice and the power and the authority, and they know that they're going to be listened to. That they're not just going to be thrown things. You're not just going to say, oh yeah, we're going to listen to you. Yeah, it's great. We've started an ethnic diversity group, or we've started a women's group, and that's great because we've done it. Well done us. Pat ourselves on the back because we've done it. but they have no power, no authority, and nobody's actually listening to their voices. Activism is about creating that space, but also agreeing and understanding that change is going to happen. And it may be scary. It may be, but we have to take the risks. The next is diversity. Diversity of thought. If you hire and recruit from the same places, people may look different, but I used to work at London Business School for 6 years. I helped to put together the marketing bit of the MBA program. The course pack did not change. So you're hiring people who think, fundamentally think the same. Diversity is, I once ran a session for a organization on diversity, and I loved it because at the end of the session, one of the new starters came up to me and said, you know what you've helped me realize? Diversity is a truth. Inclusion is a mindset, it's a behavior, it's about choice. We can all talk about doing diversity, but unless that goes hand in hand with inclusion, with making sure that we are making the changes that need to happen, that we're not just going, okay, well, yes, we've got these groups, that's it, but making sure that people feel included, they can bring their stories through to this, they feel part of that library. I mean, they may want to check out it now and again, but making sure that people feel safe enough to feel included. Humility. Strength and leadership through vulnerability. How many times have you seen leaders just go, you know that they're stressed and go, everything's okay, it's all right, I can do this, yes. But actually, the people that we respect, think about, I'm not even going to mention the names, but some of the leaders at the moment. Where's their humility and vulnerability? None. But the people who show that sense of vulnerability, we trust them more. We believe in them more because we connect with them on a very human level. We understand. I'm not saying you have to get up there and go, oh, well, you never guess what happened to me today. I mean, I woke up at 4 and blah, 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 and oh, you know, my life, and I've got a bit of a stomachache. It's not that. But it's understanding that people share and they connect through those stories of vulnerability and that sense of humility. And so that is the framework that I start to use around helping people to create what I call the human blockchain. It's the reason I say it's a human blockchain because every single person within that node, within that system, has value. And they have their own sense of identity and culture, but they also have levels of intelligence that will be powerful and beautiful for you. And it's helping that sometimes understanding that these people with their different nodes and different connections can come together. And that can fundamentally impact innovation. It can fundamentally impact the way that you do business. Because that's how you start to bridge the gap between the external story and the internal behavior, is by looking at some of those values and looking at what can we do now? The one of play, how can we create play other than getting a foosball table and going, right, we're all gonna go for a jog. What can you do that is going to encourage people to do these things? Because we need to change the way that we do things. We need to change the world. We need to change the way that business is being done, because even at the most basic level, the people that work with us and for us want to have more impact. Does everybody know what these are? The UN Sustainability Development Goals. There's a target for 2030 for us to achieve those. A starting point for a lot of the businesses that I work with is what I say to them is, look at this. Put this as a goal. And I used to think that you look at those in isolation, but you don't. You look at them all together. Start with those as a goal, and then think about the values that I've mentioned, and say, okay, so now if we've got this, retrofit, work backwards. How can we now create a culture of play or curiosity or vulnerability that is moving us towards those? Because it's not only what we want, that is what our businesses want, our stakeholders want, that's what society wants and needs. Because that, to me, is how you start to change the idea of innovation. Because innovation should be systemic. Because innovation is problem solving. So it's not one person's role. And once you have a culture where everybody understands that they are problem solvers, it will fundamentally change innovation from the bottom up. Thank you.